Hi, everybody. I am so glad to be back. And finally, I've been talking about this for a couple weeks. Soft launch by Sarah Vacchiano. And I have Sarah here. And Sarah has just informed me. I hope it's okay that I'm outing you. This is your first podcast, not just for this book, but ever,
Ever.
ever.
Yeah,
I'm so excited. I hope this makes you want to do even more because I think the best podcasts to do and to listen to are just fun.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
No, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you for reading the book.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being here and for accommodating my schedule. As I've said to many people, it's jury duty week, which I never thought I would have to say. And that's all I'm allowed to say. And I'm a rule follower. So that's all I will say. But it's not just jury duty week, it's jury duty month. And so I've had to reschedule pretty much everybody for this month. But soft launch. Okay. It is not an understatement, Sarah, to say that I blew through this book. So I loved it. Funny, so Molly Bloom, and I'm gonna ask you all about this, but when I read the bit about that you had been on the litigation team for Molly and maybe there was some loosely based she's sort of a character in the book is loosely based on her, or more than loosely, I'll ask you, but I thought, "That sounds really familiar." And then I looked it up, and I hadn't read the book, but I had seen the movie,
Yeah.
and so I was able to put 2 and 2 together, and I think 2026 is going to be the year on this podcast where I'm going to ask a lot of questions about how the heck to write fiction because it's what I'm currently working on myself and it's so wildly different from nonfiction. So, first and foremost, this is your first book. Yes.
Yes.
So, have you always wanted to write a book?
So I guess it's my first published book. I wrote
Okay.
a book that I'm still working on. It's actually a series of children's books that's like civic themed.
Oh.
But that I also wrote over the last decade. So it's kind of all been in the works. But yeah, this is the first novel, and I started it in 2013. So it kind of tracked, which is when I started representing Molly.
Really?
um,
Okay.
yeah, and at that point, there was no sense at all of Molly being, and our friendship being an anchor for the book.
Mhm.
That came much later. I really set out to write a book about starting over at 30, and living a life that was completely untethered to the life I lived in my 20s, which was really a fairly traditional domestic, married young life. And so I thought that that would be an interesting hook. And then my career as it took shape, and my life, obviously, as life happened, the book took shape over the whole period.
So are there a lot of memoir-ish elements to it? Is
Yes.
it largely based?
Yeah, it's very much a Ramona Cliff. I feel like, I took fictional liberties, I condensed timelines, obviously, and certain things that had happened, but a lot of it is tracks.
Okay.
And yeah, I couldn't have written it any sooner, honestly, because, I got married in 2021 and had a baby in 2022, and, you know, everything just kind of has happened recently. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy, and the whole story of how it came to be, the publishing is like a publishing fairy tale in and of itself, so, like, I feel like I'll make so many references to that, so maybe I can start just by telling you that because
Would you? Because one question I have, I was certain about 30 minutes ago that the book was not yet out, and it's not, right? But I just wanted to double check because sometimes I conflate books. And I looked, and the first thing that I saw was that you already have a large number of reviews. And I thought, oh, so it must be out. But then I realized it's not out. And then I put 2 and 2 together that because it's with little a, which is an Amazon imprint, I just learned this today. Apparently, nobody can have reviews published on Amazon until the book is published, unless you're with an Amazon imprint, it would
oh, that
appear.
makes sense.
Is that I mean, it does make sense, but it's kind of interesting.
So it technically came out January 1st as an Amazon First Reads. So, they do those 8
Oh,
editors picks on the 1st of each month.
okay, okay,
So that's, like, where the early reviews have been coming
got
in.
it.
So it's been out in the world for 8 days,
Yeah,
only on Kindle. and it'll be published officially on
Okay,
February.
so let's scratch the rumor that if you're published with little a across the
Makes
board,
sense.
maybe you do, maybe you don't, but let's put a little context behind that because yeah, first read. Okay, cool. So tell me about this publishing journey.
So I finished the book in 2021. It was halfway written when COVID started. I felt like it was halfway written. I didn't really know. I assumed. And when COVID happened and we started working remotely, I decided to finish it. And I had a writing group, and were all working on things. And it was such a unique experience to be working from home when I built my career, in the 7 to 7, at your
Yeah.
desk, and not having the flexibility to really do anything other than when you can carve out time. So I finished it in 2021, had started querying agents. I mean, I was really like, I had a spreadsheet. I was so organized. I was pounding the pavement. I work in film. And so I obviously like, I have a lot of like book to film agents,
Mhm.
friends. My network is like good, but I didn't really understand the publishing side of it at all. But I tried, my best to I put together a query letter, and I probably queried 100 agents, and I would get a few good responses here and there. I was like, like, this sounds really interesting, but I'm not sure where I would place it in the marketplace right now, and things like that. And so I just like kept going, and I had friends read it, people that I knew could like were avid readers who could maybe give me some pointers to polish it up if there ever was somebody who responded wanting to read it. And then I got pregnant, and we decided to move to LA. I got poached for a job with with a talent agency that I'd worked with for years, and they said, "We really want you to move to LA." And my husband and I were like diehard New Yorkers, and I was like, I've been working from home for 2 years. I haven't really gotten dressed in 2 years. I'm pregnant now." So like the combination of like being pregnant, thinking I might never dress myself again, I was like, I just got to like put my foot on the gas and really ramp it up. So I took the job in LA. We got married in New York on like January 15th. We moved 10 days later. I started a new job in LA 10 days later,
Okay.
had my son 3 months later, and the rest is history. So, all that to say, I just completely stopped querying. I stopped everything. I put it in
Yeah.
a drawer metaphorically and said, someday when I have the ability to revisit this, I will. About a year and a half ago, this woman who had read it as a friend, but we hadn't stayed in touch, she read it in 2021. She emailed me and she said, "I'm an editor now at Lake Union, and I think about your manuscript all the time, and I wonder if anyone bought it, and if not, would you send it to me again?"
Wow.
And I was like, "I literally haven't even thought about this in 4 years, like I haven't. Like it's always been in the back of my mind, but not in any real way." And so I sent it to her and didn't hear anything again for 6 months, and then 6 months later, she said her colleague who was an editor at Little A loved it and wanted to Zoom. We did one Zoom, and she bought it. And then I went into this, like, insane editorial process
Yeah.
for a manuscript I hadn't looked at in 4 years, 5 years by that point. So it really was like a publishing fairy tale. I didn't have an agent when I sold it. I do
Do you
now.
now? Okay.
Yes, which is also my dream agency that I
Mm.
for 10 years dreamed about being with, so it's like it's a fairy tale for every aspect of it. For like having, I have to remind myself I really pounded the pavement to get it out there, but
Yeah.
then 4 years happened, and so it sort of felt like an overnight thing, but it wasn't. It was like the groundwork had been laid, and I just got very, very lucky that this woman remembered having read it
Yeah.
and passed it to the right people.
That is pretty much unheard of.
I know, I know.
Yeah. So then to depart for just a second from this book, what now? Because when you have such a it wasn't an overnight thing. To your point, you've been working on the book since 2013. You had queried over 100 agents. They all had said no, or you hadn't heard back at all. You put it in the metaphorical drawer. You went on with life. So it's not like you just wrote a book and then they all came out of the woodwork or anything, but still for it to then fast forward. So how long was the process then from acquisition to we'll call it January 1 when it
Less
came out, at least a year?
less than a year.
Less than a year. That's also unheard of.
I know, 11 months. Yeah.
Was there a lot of editing that or was it talk to us about the editing process a little bit.
So the editorial process was Incredible. I mean, and it's funny, I feel like my whole life is an Amazon simulation because as a lawyer, I run business affairs for United Artists, which is an MGM Amazon owned company. So Amazon finances my company. And I also am published by Amazon, so it's like I work very closely with all different aspects of the company. And I was just blown away from like day one by how thoughtful they were. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if it would be line edits. I didn't know if it would be just like a 2 page, like overall, make it more this, like,
Sure.
and I was up for all of it, but it ended up being kind of the best of both worlds because I had my in-house editor and then there was a freelance editor who was very, very in the weeds, who I adored just as much as my actual editor. And it was kind of like we triangulated, the three of us, and she sent me, I mean, it was 300 pages. I printed it. There were some line edits, but there was a lot of just like, very open-ended comments in the margin of like,
Mhm.
this doesn't feel earned yet, or like, we need to feel more of this. And so it took a couple rounds. I think it was 3 rounds in total over
Okay.
probably 4 months. But it was such a rewarding process, and it was so crazy to have turned 40 right before I sold the book and had started writing it when I was 30. And so, like, my 40-year-old self looking back at something I started at 30 and having lived the next 10 years as I was editing the story was kind of surreal.
Sometimes when people put their manuscripts in the metaphorical drawer for even 5 minutes, but let alone like 4 to 5 years, they come back to it and they just feel like, "Oh, I wanna change this, and now I wanna change this." How much of that was part of your experience?
There was a fair amount that I wanted to change, definitely. I wanted it to be more vulnerable because I felt
Mm,
more comfortable at this point in my life being more vulnerable, about kind of the floundering. I mean, the character, and I hope that that comes through. Like, there really was a very, very steep growth, learning curve
yeah.
for her slash me. I say all
Mhm.
the time, like, I arrived in New York about to turn 30, and I was great on paper. I'd gone to a top 10 law school, I was at a top law firm, and personally and emotionally, I didn't feel like it was the same.
And I think that's what was so relatable to me about the book, is everything's right for her on paper, but not like, not inside her. And
Yeah.
so, that's why I'm and different people, different readers find different reasons to root for a character, but that's why I was rooting for her, because I could feel her sense. I don't wanna give anything away, but of wanting to do the right thing, just no longer at the cost of her own happiness.
Yes.
That was very, very relatable for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the like idea of evolution, as a focal point, it's like you're going to make missteps, right? Like that is part of the process. Like it kind of has to be messy. Growth isn't linear. I mean, like all of those things that I feel like I've said over and over at this point, but it's true. It's like, the old
Mhm.
Italian saying, you don't get an omelet without cracking a few eggs. Like, it's just kind of that's life. I think that's like a metaphor for life. And what I would say to women who are, starting out, whether they're starting over in a career or a relationship or whatever, it's like you have to kind of go through all of these chapters to then fast forward and imagine the life that you really want to grow into. And if someone had told me when I was 30 and started writing this book that, I would be living the life personally and professionally that I'm living now in my 40s, it's like I would have I don't I would have been beside myself.
Correct.
So,
Would you have even believed it?
no. No, not to the
Right.
extent that it
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
So, one of the topics that I'm really curious about talking more about this year on the podcast is this idea of, in fact, I just recorded a podcast just by myself for, I think, next week, about the concepts of failure and loss. And not loss as in a person like losing the game. And I think game being obviously a metaphor, but so many authors who I talk to are type A. They're perfectionists. They like to get it right. They like to check the boxes. And so you just said something that made me think about what I was have been thinking about, which is this idea of like, if you're not willing to let a few eggs crack, the analogies are just gonna be flying today, Sarah. You're not gonna make an omelet.
I hope so. I'm full of them, so
Well, that make well, we could have a lot of fun then. Like, and the thing that I had come up with for myself is what opportunity am I saying I'm willing to give up in order not to lose?
mm,
Right? Like, what when you're not willing to be flexible in that way and let yourself, see the air quotes, fail or
yeah,
lose or make a misstep, what are you gonna miss out on? And in this book, without giving anything away, it would have been everything. She would have missed out on everything.
yeah.
Well, maybe not every we don't know how I don't think we know how one piece of it would have gone, but we know how another piece of it would have gone.
Yeah. Oh, for
So,
sure.
does that resonate? Like, how do you approach that just as a lawyer, as a human, as an author? How do you approach the concept of failure and losing the game, if you will?
I mean, I think there's a balance to it because, having said in the book that I grew up loving the theater and wanting to be an actor and then, pivoting because of practical reasons, like law school is that sure bet in many ways, right? Like this is a career that if at this point I'm useless for anything but entertainment law, but like, before I could have gone in different directions and like
Right.
I could have been, like an M&A lawyer or whatever and
Uh-huh.
and I would have been okay. I think that for me, and I don't know if I intentionally did this, but because entertainment law was my dream when I stumbled upon it, I sort of felt that I was threading the needle between finding a career that I knew there would be a fallback and I
Mhm.
wasn't gonna fail entirely. I wasn't gonna fall on my face in every possible way, but
Okay.
because I had that safeguard in the back of my mind of like, I've gotten a law degree, I've got some transferable skill set. It allowed me to go after the kind of law that I wanted to do. It allowed me to, write for myself, it just I mean, because I was always just writing therapeutically, really. I mean, like the
Yeah.
novel, I love to write since I was little, um, but the novel itself was more like about making sense of the failure that I had just
Yeah.
experienced.
Okay. Okay. So with that in mind, then comes my next question because I feel like in the novel this is a selfish question, I'll admit it, but in the novel I'm working on now, that's exactly what it is. It's making sense of something. I'm writing my way through making sense of something. So, did you always know how this thing ended? Like, did you know the different and there's no right answer. I'm just curious. I'm often trying to figure out when other I think there's a difference between writing from point to point where you've conjured the vast majority of the story
Mm,
versus when you're laying it over top of your own life, if you will. And like when do you shift from your own experience? How do you know when it ends? How do you are you writing the ending that you always wanted? Or are you what how did you does that my question even make sense, Sarah?
no, it does, and I mean, the 3 cases that I anchored the legal part of the book with, right, which was Molly, and then there was, the guy who invested $25 million into a slate of films, and then there was the governor, the senator who had been investigated. Those were all real cases, I mean, I
Yeah.
had done Bridgegate, the Chris Christie thing, and that's what that was sort of based on.
Okay.
And so as those experiences happened to me professionally,
Mhm.
I started to feel a little more confident in myself personally, And
Mm.
so it was like I could sort of see going after what I wanted personally as I started achieving what I'd set out to do professionally
Yeah.
because it did feel in the beginning having left a marriage and changed my life completely and the casualties that sort of, were the fallout from that decision,
Yeah.
that it was incumbent on me to be laser focused on what I wanted to achieve. And
Mhm.
my career has always been that, like even as a mother, I mean, I try to balance it, but like
Right.
need the
Yes.
career, like
Yes.
I
Yes.
need to have that sense of validation in addition to feeling like I'm making it as a mother.
Yes.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but
It does. It's really it's just tricky, right? Like, I think this is something that so many women specifically, and I wanna say specifically mothers, relate to because there's I don't believe in balance. I hear you when you say it's a balance, and of course we use that term and we
yeah,
talk about it being a balancing act, but I have just decided that balance in my life is being off balance. There is the teeter totter is always like slightly one way or the other. I don't know. I mean, we're in the middle of this podcast right now, and I don't know if in a minute ago you saw me do this. If anyone's not watching this, I'm like waving someone away. My one of my sons walked up, and he's 24 and just yelled, "I just got a criminal ticket." I'm in the middle of a podcast, right?
you need to
No,
pause and go take care of that.
like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now, right? Like, I cannot I know where this is not a he thinks it's an emergency, obviously, it's important, but I
Criminal.
need to be focused here. So it's like this is like the moment where it's an illustrative example of we can't be everywhere and doing all the things well at one time,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
So how do
You
we
can be a real
make
person, and
my God, in
and that
one
feels great. And if you need to pause this, honestly, I
oh,
don't know
I
how
do
this
not.
podcast
No, no, no. I
recording
don't.
works.
I will get to him. He will be just fine. I think. I can hear him yelling, so I think he's called his father. So he gets to
It's great to have a
handle
partner.
this. But it's like it's I that to me, you just thank you for this because sometimes I feel like so for example, I'm on this jury right now, which is again all I'm allowed to say. And the cliche story to write, I feel, because I thought when this happened, I thought, oh my God, this is a nightmare. Like, how am I going to make this work? And my first thought was, well, I'm going to write a book about not a book about the trial, but a book about being on a jury or something. I'm going to somehow incorporate this, a scene or a moment or something. And then I thought that the most cliche thing I could do is, oh, a romance develops between two of the jurors. And I don't want to do that because it just feels overdone. I want to write a thriller if I'm being honest, but I want to do something a little bit different. But it made me start to think about why certain genres just get repeated and why we keep not only writing them, but reading them. And
Yeah.
Sarah, I think that's a huge part of it is we're trying to figure out through some of these characters how to, first of all, that not even how to do it, but like that we're okay, that it's okay. And it really helps when you read a character like the character in Soft Launch and and then you go, but it's just a character. And at the same time, I found myself thinking, but I kind of think this is Sarah. Just knowing your background and knowing what was going on in the book, I thought, I don't think there's any way that she hasn't laid some of her own experiences on top of this. And
Yeah.
so thank you for that, really, like for being that transparent, et cetera, to you know what I mean? Like
No, I mean, look, like, I think that the vulnerability aspect, especially being a career woman, and sort of having to affect an image, all the time. Writing also helps with that, right? It's like, if I can't just be the unhinged person I feel like inside, I'm gonna write about it.
right, right. Or both. Can we do
Or
both?
both. Yes. That's my platform, more on but
Unhinged.
truly, like, it's like the people that have made the most impact on my life, whether it was through, therapy or through a podcast or, what a book, are the people who are vulnerable, right?
Mhm.
And the people who really share their experience. And it's just like, people don't wanna feel like they're by themselves, like we're going through isolated experiences, and the older you get, you realize we're not, and that's why sharing experiences, I think, is so incredibly important. But again, this is a decade after this all happened, and so
Yeah.
I have the benefit of that growth and self-awareness and, like, I don't and backbone, if that's the right word for it. The early reviews that have come in are thankfully more good than bad. But of course, there's going to be bad reviews. I hate some books that everyone loves. Like, it just is what it is.
Yes.
Well, I don't
Yeah.
know if I would have had that perspective 10 years ago, but
Yeah.
I agree with most of the bad reviews, like she was all over the place. She was self-destructive at times. She was like narcissistic. It's like, show me somebody in their 20s or early 30s that hasn't
Who's
been
not?
in one way or another.
That's interesting when you say you agree with some of the I've never heard that before.
Mm,
Like, I mean, I've heard people
I
say
understand all.
in nonfiction say, "Oh, that's valid. I didn't touch upon that topic," or something. In fiction, I don't know that I've ever heard anyone say, I agree with some of them.
Well, I think because it sort of does, it's towing the line between fiction and nonfiction, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
yeah, I mean, but I don't know. I also, my favorite characters were very flawed, and I still, to this day, that's what I would prefer to watch than someone
Right.
that I can identify with. And so, yeah, that's who I
Yeah.
wrote.
So what's next? Where do you go from such a miraculous
It's all happened. It's downhill from here. I don't know. My agent, I mean, it's just a dream. And she said to me, in 5 years, do you want to be a full time writer or do you want to be a full time lawyer? And I said, if I'm answering right
both?
now, I want to be both. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Like, that is, I love what I do. I worked incredibly hard to get to this point. I'm probably one of the only people I know in my circle who is obsessed with their job, and just like truly enjoys working. And so I do want to continue doing both.
Yeah.
I would write a second book. The other kind of consistent feedback has been it's open-ended, the ending, and is
Mm.
there a second book? And, there is definitely a second book in me. So
I loved the way you did the ending. I'm gonna give nothing away, I promise. I learned this term from my friend Neely Tubati Alexander, who's also a fiction novelist, and she's third or fourth novel just came out with Harper, not too long ago, and she told me about this concept of happily ever after or happy for now. And
mm,
I didn't even know that those concepts because I work so many of the authors, most of the authors with whom I work are writing nonfiction or memoir. So I'm not talking about fiction a lot unless I'm talking about my own struggles. But what is it? HEA and HFN are actually acronyms that are, the happily ever after, happily for now. I was like, for now, I thought, my God. But I'm not, I don't want to give anything. You did it in a way where I thought, wow, I like this because it is a little open. You did leave it open. Oh, you kind of pulled like a Stranger Things. Do you watch Stranger Things? All
yeah,
I hear about in my house, but
I
I
know.
really liked it. Now, was that full on intentional or did you,
Yeah.
yes? Okay.
I mean, look, like and this is in the book too. I grew into myself creatively and as a lawyer with independent film. And
Yeah.
the entire, beginning of my career was an independent film, very, very squarely. And now that I'm at a studio, I still have that sensibility. I still see myself as an indie person.
Yeah.
And that is the that's just what you do. You don't tie anything up, like, it's like, that's just it, because that's not
Okay.
life. Because that is, like, right? It's like,
Okay.
real life is not happily ever after. It is
Yeah.
happy for now. Maybe that now extends to ever after. We don't
Yeah.
know.
It's not a Hallmark movie,
It's not a Hallmark movie. No, and it never is, and it's
and
like,
it never is.
and I try to tell my son who's only 3 and a half, but I feel like he understands a little bit. It's like, like, you'll be happy, and then you're not gonna be happy, and then you're gonna be happy again, and then you're not gonna be happy, and then you're gonna
As
be
I'm
happy.
currently dealing with, right?
Goal is not like, when am I going to just be happy forever?
All the
It's
time.
it's
Right.
yes. Yeah,
And if you were, you wouldn't even know that that's what you were because you wouldn't know what the opposite is.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So I
Well, I'm so glad we made this work, and thank you so much for joining us and for writing this book,
thank
and I
you.
can't wait to see where it goes because it's
Thank you for having.
just oh, it's wonderful.
I really appreciate it. This has been the most fantastic beginning experience on
I'm
a podcast.
so glad. I'm so glad.